Hello and welcome to West Wales. In today's video I'm warping up my 16-inch Ridgid heddle loom for the first time, and I'm going to give you my impressions of it. I've got a couple of lovely books to share with you, plus got a little woodland walk that I'm going to share, and the signs of spring are coming. If you're new here, my name is Becca, and if you're an old friend, lovely to have you back. There's so much in the way of fallen branches. It's been so windy the last 2 months really, and there's a lot of new trees down, but it's nice and calm today, so we're taking this opportunity to actually walk through here before another storm rolls in, which is due in, I think, the weekend. I don't think we're going to get snow. There are some places in the UK are going to be really hit again. I think if you live somewhere where snow is the norm in the winter, you must find the kind of attitude of the, well, I was going to say particularly if you live in southern England, but the kind of people who live in the UK, you know, kind of like half a millimetre of snow and we go into panic mode. Anyway, probably not going to get snow. Probably not even going to get any frost, but it looks like there's a really big tree down here. It's nice though. It's kind of really fresh, not too cold. Millie's enjoying herself. Right, let's see how far we can get along here. Looks like there's a really big tree down. So the tree behind me came down in the last lot of really big winds. I'll turn the camera around so you can see properly. So you wouldn't want to have been anywhere near that when that came down. You can see all the roots sticking out. You can probably hear the water. I'm not sure how effective this video is going to be with that sound of the water in the background. But boy, this is why you don't walk in the woodland in a high wind. So there's more. Look at it. Oh man. I mean, can you imagine how terrifying this must have been with the high winds? I mean, it's been pretty much kind of tidied away so people can walk along the footpath now, but whew, yeah, scary biscuits. So that was the footpath. I really don't fancy going past that. I mean, it's alright for Millie, she's a little light thing. Look at that tree. Millie, please don't do that. Back home in the echoey conservatory, I have a cup of coffee and the dog is down here. And I'm slightly leaning because I'm just scratching her back. And she gets a bit discombobulated when I'm here in the conservatory and Andrew's out in front taking photographs, and she tries to sort of bring the pack together. So she might be a little bit noisy, as she quite often is in the videos. And it's not that she's noisy all the time, she really isn't, but it's just that when we are sort of not together, all three of us in the same room or very close to each other, she kind of feels like it's her duty to try and herd us together. Very eccentric little dog. Right, so what am I talking about today? Okay, so if you've been here before, then you will know that I have been toying with the idea of getting a new Ridgid heddle loom for some time. About 3 years ago, or actually it might be more than 3 years ago. Anyway, a few years ago, I bought myself a Ridgid heddle loom to weave with my hand spun, and I bought a really wide one and wove about 4 things. I've got a couple of them here, all of which were sort of very, very narrow, and it gathered dust and it was too big and I had to put it on a frame and I just didn't really get on with it, so I sold it. And have still been kind of quite interested in the idea of weaving, So this Christmas, my Christmas present to myself was a 16-inch Ridgid heddle loom. It's an Ashford loom. So a couple of days ago, I got it out and started to warp it up. I've come outside to warp up because I haven't got a long enough run in the house without sort of moving great big bits of furniture. So what I have is the big outdoor table sort of joined onto, very inexpertly, the old market table. Because we used to run farmers markets, or not run them, we used to attend farmers markets as traders, and we kept a couple of the big trestle tables, one of which has since disintegrated, but I do still have one that is kind of usable. So that is what I'm doing, and as I'm going through this process, I'm remembering that I told myself the last time I warped a loom, which is quite a while ago, that yeah, direct warping, be annoying because you need quite a long run if you want to achieve a reasonable length of fabric. So I think I will be looking at a slightly different method going forward, but this is what I'm doing at the moment. This is what I've got, this is the equipment I've got, so I'm doing it this way. And I've also realised that although I have been watching lots of videos on how to warp your Ridgid heddle loom, I don't even know which way round I need the loom. I can't remember which way to put at the back and the front, and it's like, oh, okay. So this could be all wrong. So this is definitely not going to be an instructional video. This is going to be a work it out as I go along video. Anyway, I'll turn the camera around and show you what I mean. So this is the big outdoor table, which is about it's 5'6", I think it is, and then sort of propped up at the other end of it is the old market table, just with a bit of cloth over it, because although I've wiped it to try and get the various bits of green algae on it, that, I mean, it's been in the shed for ages, so there were bits of green algae on it. So I just put a cloth on to try and protect my warp threads from getting green algae on them. And I could only find an old painting cloth that was even vaguely long enough. So it's all a bit Heath Robinson. And I think I'm going to attach the loom back here and have the warping peg down there. So if you buy your loom new, which I did, then you have a very handy little leaflet from Ashford. And my goodness, do I need this? Right, I think I now have the loom the right way round. Always a good start. So back stick, I need to put a clamp in there, and then peg down the other end. Right, I think I feel a bit of time lapse coming on. Stage 1 is complete, so zero consideration towards design, just literally use as much as I need and I've got, and it's done. So stage 2. I've come inside. I have to go and walk the dog, but I have sort of got this far. So to be continued. So I have been doing some weaving. I will show you how it's going. I've made a couple of mistakes, I think it's fair to say, but actually my selvage edge, I'm sort of getting there, I think, with it. And having woven before, it was not a completely new experience, but I am thinking that in order to sort of progress beyond just plain weave, I think I might take some classes. So I have been looking out for some online classes. So if you've got any suggestions, then just put them in the comments. So somebody who particularly weaves Ridgid heddle, that would be really helpful. I'd really like that. So the next thing I wanted to say was I just want to thank all those people who sent me very kind messages. In my last video, I was a little bit blue, I was a bit down, I didn't have a great night's sleep, and I just shared that I was not feeling great. And people were very supportive, and I had some lovely heartfelt messages. Thank you so much. It really does help, and I'm feeling much more myself. And my word of the year is balance, and I really am trying to achieve balance. So listening to my sort of myself, how I'm feeling, and when I'm not feeling great, actually just stopping and sort of disconnecting slightly from social media, not kind of putting myself under pressure to always be achieving things. And it is a lifelong habit of being competitive and pushing myself. I've done it since I was a child. It is part of my, I don't know, my DNA, I think. And sometimes I just have to go, hang on a minute, just back off a little bit and calm down. So much calmer, much happier today. Lovely walk, as you saw a bit earlier. And yeah, I'm feeling much better. So thank you again. It's so lovely that there's this wonderful community of crafters across the globe, and they sent me lots of love. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so what books do I want to share with you today? I've got two books, and the first one was actually gifted by a member of the community. You know who you are. Thank you very much. I really, really am enjoying it. So it's a Dyer's Garden. And as you probably know, if you've been around this channel any time at all, I have been on a little adventure growing my own dye plants. I have been a natural dyer for about 35 years, but I've always used foraged plants. Up until last year, I'd never actually grown plants specifically for dyeing. So this is a great addition to my library. I'm really, really enjoying it. And I'm always a little bit nervous about sharing the contents of books because this is somebody's intellectual property. So yeah, there's some great information in it and I can highly recommend it. I was going to say I'll put a link, but I'm having a bit of a kind of do I want to put Amazon links below moment. I think there might be a better way of sharing links to books. I just need to investigate it a little bit more, but I'll put the title there. So you can obviously choose, if you want to buy it, you can choose your bookshop. So whether you need to work, whether you need to buy online because really that's your only option, or if you can support a local bookshop, just, kind of do what works for you. So the dog has just found a sunflower seed or sunflower seed hearts because we feed the birds, and I obviously, when I was topping up the bird feeders, I must have spilled a few seeds on the conservatory floor, and she's just found them and she's going, oh lovely. Yeah, don't think dogs are supposed to eat sunflower seeds. Anyway, okay, so what's my next book? So making Welsh quilts. And gone down a bit of a rabbit hole with this. So making Welsh quilts, the textile tradition, oh dear, glasses, the textile tradition that inspired the Amish. So I really first became aware of Welsh quilts when visiting St Fagans. It's one of the National Museums of Wales, and if you grew up in Wales or have Welsh connections of any sort, then you've probably been to St Fagans. It is kind of, I don't know if you're from North Wales whether you have to go as a school child, but it's like, you know, it's obligatory, you must go there. But it's great, it's an open air museum. They have reconstructed lots and lots of buildings from around Wales, and it tells the story of Welsh culture. So I've seen Welsh quilts at St Fagans. I haven't been to St Fagans for some time, so I don't know if they're still exhibiting there. I suspect they are. And I just kind of thought, oh, that's quite interesting. And then as I've got more interested in relearning to sew later in life, I started investigating quilting and kind of rediscovered Welsh quilts. And I was like, oh yes, I remember those. I remember those really gorgeous designs, and they are gorgeous. And I've heard somebody say, and I really can't remember where it was either in a YouTube documentary or maybe I read it somewhere, that you sort of, if you are a quilter, if you're a kind of modern quilter, to make a Welsh quilt, you almost have to unlearn your quilting, because they're not constructed in blocks the way modern quilting is. They're much more, people work from a central medallion. You can see we've got these central medallions. I don't know if you can see. So you've got a central medallion and then sort of work out. And Welsh quilts, when they started life, sort of so it's about 150 years when they were really produced in big numbers. And they started off with lots of woolen quilts, and it was woolen flannel because that's what was made in Wales. The woolen industry was a massive industry, and they made flannel, which means that the woven wool has then been fulled or finished. So it's like suiting material. So if you've got a sort of business suit, a woolen business suit, that's a flannel, and that's what they were made of because that's what was available. And so you see them in quite subdued colours because they're sort of greys and blacks, and there's splashes of red because, you know, kind of what would Wales be without some beautiful red textiles. And they were 2 layers of patchwork quilt with quite often a layer of wool, and it was wool that had been sort of gathered off the hedgerows. So I suppose we would think of it as like a wool bat now, and the quilting element was quite minimal, so it was not heavily quilted because obviously you've got a lot of thickness to go through with a wool quilt. And they very much fell out of fashion when it became easier to obtain printed cotton. And really you're talking sort of mid 1900s, so if you think 1850 is really when we start to get the synthetic dyes, and the whole textile industry is totally revolutionised. We've got factory produced cotton which starts being available to kind of normal working class people. If you were, and the dog's just barking, hold that thought, I will be back. Did you hold that thought? I certainly did. Anyway, dog is suitably happy because Andrew is back in the house, so now she can feel like at least some of the pack's together. So where was I? Right, yeah, so sort of 1850s, 1860s, there's this huge change because we're getting the railways, we're getting the mass production of cotton, and it's becoming accessible to people who are living in Wales, because that sounds like, well, of course they would have had cotton. Well, no, not at all, because what was produced locally was wool and linen. And there probably was some cotton being produced, but not in the numbers or not in the amounts that it was produced in somewhere like Bradford. So you get this sort of mixing. And also the other really significant thing that's happening is we're starting to see the industrialisation of South Wales. And it's pulling people in from all over the country to work in the mines and work in the iron foundries and the kind of the new industry that is beginning to boom in South Wales. The other thing that's happening is we're starting to see immigration to America. And the link between the Amish and the Welsh quilts is said to be that it is the quilting culture that Welsh immigrants took to America, and in particular in the areas where the Amish kind of lived, and you got this kind of cross-pollination of sewing cultures. I mean, I'm no academic, I can't tell you how accurate that is, but that seems to be what people think is the kind of the connection and the link. So we're starting to see cotton and sort of printed fabrics being used rather than these sort of quite plain woolen fabrics. Now, the other thing that happens is we start to see a bit of a middle class developing all over the country, but you know, in Wales, no different from anywhere else, there is a middle class, and they are no longer sewing their own kind of quilts and clothes and things. They're actually buying them or paying people to make them for them. So the quilt changes a little bit, and you have a kind of, if you like, almost like a class divide. So you've got the working people who are making quilts in traditional designs with scraps of fabric, worn out clothes. So you get this multi-textile type of quilt. Then you're getting a quilt that is produced to be sold to the middle classes and the more well off. And that is when we start to see whole cloth quilts. And it could be that the culture comes from Northern England as people are coming in to work in these industrial areas, because that's quite a traditional kind of quilting style in the north of the country, in the north of England. And from what I can tell, the quilting kind of tradition is quite a sort of South Wales and West Wales culture. That seems to be, it may be Mid Wales as well. Please correct me in the comments if I'm not correct about that. As I said, not an expert, but this is just sort of the little bit of research I've done. This is what I'm gleaning. And it started to be all about the hand quilting. So quite often the piecing together was done by machine, but the quilting was done by hand. And you had professional quilters who would quilt these whole cloths or the pieced together cloths. And as the century turns and we get to the sort of 1910s, 1920s, we start to see a guild for quilting, an institute for quilting, where these women would train to be professional quilters. And so if you go to places like there's the Welsh Quilt Centre in Lampeter, sorry, just went out of my head then, in Lampeter, you might well see that, and quite often you will see these exhibition pieces that were produced for the Eisteddfods. Then also in those collections there are some of the very early quilts. So where can you see quilts like this? Okay, so there is a really great feed, an Instagram feed by Jen Jones, who sells traditional and antique Welsh quilts. She also has done lots and lots of research on the history and the culture, and probably she's going to be what you know, she's the expert really. And she lectures at St Fagans, and she still sells quilts. And a lot of what we think of as very traditional Welsh quilts are actually in her personal collection, and she particularly collects the woolen flannel quilts. There are also a couple of other museums where you might see them. There's the Textile Museum in Newtown, which is Mid Wales, and then just up the road from me in Llangollen there is the Woollen Museum, and they have Welsh quilts there as well. I haven't been in ages, so I can't tell you when they are exhibiting them, because their exhibits change. But those are kind of places where you might see Welsh quilts. And then of course there are people making Welsh quilts. There was a real resurgence in the 1960s, and particularly using Laura Ashley fabrics, because Laura Ashley had her manufacturing kind of base in Wales, and so there was lots of factory offcuts, and quilters, being the resourceful people that they are, they were using these Laura Ashley fabrics to make these beautiful traditional Welsh quilts. And there still is a strong tradition of quilting in this style, but again, you know, we get this kind of mixing of cultures. So we have much more a kind of mixture of quilts from America, quilts from Wales, quilts from Northern England, and we're all sort of this big melting pot of cultures and quilting styles. And you will see it now reflected. There's a really lovely exhibition of quilts in Fishguard, I think about once a year. So I will try and remember to take you there the next time it is. And you see a complete mixture of modern, traditional, American style quilting. You might see a sort of more of the Asian style of quilting. And it is just this amazing amalgamation of cultures and styles, which makes, well, just textile art just so exciting. I find it exciting anyway. So I can highly recommend this book. I definitely am going to be adapting one of the designs in here, and I will share that process. And I've been collecting little bits and pieces that I think might make a really interesting Welsh style quilt for my first quilting project. Now, I did a patchwork project, which was a cushion that you probably will have seen on the channel, but I ended up not quilting it. So I will actually attempt a patchwork cushion that I then hand quilt in the Welsh style. So that is what I'm sort of planning to come a little bit later on as I carry on through the months. That's my kind of project for, well, probably Sundays, I think. I am still trying to do 2 videos a week. If I miss a video, it's not because I've kind of gone off the idea of making YouTube videos, and I love them. It's just that, you know, something else has happened. I'm really busy and I haven't quite got to it. But that's sort of what I'm planning. So I'm going to have a slurp of coffee and then talk to you about the Ashford 16-inch Ridgid heddle loom. Okay, so this is, oh, my messy table, but here is my loom, and I've really been trying to concentrate on my selvage edges, and I don't think I've got my beating quite right, so it's a bit gappy. But generally, I found it pretty easy to warp up, and I have to say, pretty easy to use. So my idea is that I'm just going to kind of weave and weave and weave and weave until I run out, and then take it off the loom and yeah, see what we get. So that's where I'm up to. So let's kind of talk about what I like about it, what I don't like about it. So what do I like? The build quality and the materials, as ever with Ashford, are beautiful. I mean, absolutely cannot fault them. It's solid wood and it's beautifully made. I struggled a little bit with a couple of bits where I was putting it together, and that's more to do with me not reading instructions properly rather than kind of it being difficult to do, because it wasn't difficult to do at all. It's just I kind of raced ahead rather than stopping and reading the instructions properly. But hey ho, you know, that's just life, isn't it? We won't worry too much about that. And right, warping up. I remember this from the last time I owned a Ridgid heddle loom. Direct warping is a pain in the bottom. Really don't like it, because you need, if you want any length of kind of fabric or finished fabric, you just have to have like kind of this great big long run of tables. So I think I'm going to be looking for a warping frame. So my idea is that I am going to experiment with different ways of warping up, because I want to be able to warp single-handed. Although obviously Andrew is here, him sort of assisting me from the wheelchair might be a bit tricky. So I want to try and get to a point where, you know, I've got this whole warping thing down pat. It's not at the moment. It was a bit hit and miss what I did, as you probably saw. But it is something I'd seen somebody do, so I didn't just make it up. That is the method I'd seen someone do on YouTube. So I thought, well, I'll try this, see if it works. Then I've also seen a method with Sarah from Way of Weaving, and I think I quite liked her method of doing it. I've also seen it when people put the warping peg on a trolley. I've seen it where people have a sort of a little like kind of like I was going to say a frame, I don't mean that, do I? But they've got like a clothes hook. They've got kind of clothes hooks in a row, and they use that. But you've still got to have that huge, great big run of table in order to do that. Yeah, so I'm going to experiment with that and see what I find works for me. Always happy to have suggestions, things that work for you. Let me know what you think, or whether I'm just going to get used to that whole direct warping thing and it's going to be fine. Because yeah, I didn't really get on with that, has to be said. I'm clearly not beating very evenly because it's a bit uneven the way I'm doing it. I'm pretty sure I've been sort of pinching the sides of my, sorry, I'm looking down here, you can't see it, it's out of shot. I've been pinching the sides of the selvage and then doing a 30-degree angle, and that seems to be working. The selvage edge it's not terrible, but you know, this is not my first time weaving. So yeah, I think I would highly recommend an Ashford. I think it's good fun. I certainly wouldn't want a bigger loom. My idea was that I would be able to work sort of from my lap in the evenings, watching a bit of TV, and somebody suggested trying it on a cushion, and it didn't quite work for me on a cushion, so I actually had a chair in front of me last night when I was working, and that wasn't quite right. But I think a little sort of table on wheels or something, or a little trolley, just to be able to rest the back of it on, will work very well. Is there anything I don't like about it? The threading up hook is made of plastic. Ew! Come on, Ashford, something a little sturdier than that kind of floppy piece of plastic. So, you know, really, you know, a little metal hook would have been so much nicer. So I don't like that. What else don't I like? Actually, I think that's it really. So far, I'm really impressed. Really like it. Really enjoying it. And it's not over big. I kind of did look at the smaller samplet, the 10-inch samplet. And I don't know, maybe I should have gone for that one. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. So I'm enjoying it, and I definitely want to find somebody who's got some really good how-to videos. There are some good ones on YouTube, but the trouble with YouTube is, and I mean, I know it myself from making YouTube videos, you go in all directions. There's not a logical with a course, you've got a very logical progression, and YouTube videos, you don't have a logical progression, just because of the nature of, you know, what you're doing. Okay, so that I think is me done for this week's, I was going to say Woolly Wednesday, but it's been more of a kind of Weaving Wednesday. Next week is a spin along video. So we've got the Hill Radnor, or I'm spinning the Hill Radnor. If you are following along with me, then that's the one I'm doing next. But if you're just kind of spinning rare breeds but not in the same order, that's fine too. There have been some lovely shares on Instagram using the hashtag #RareBreedSpinAlong. If you'd like me to share your spins in my stories, then tag me in. I'm not precious about you tagging me in, you really don't need to. I would like this rare breed spinning thing to just sort of take off, have a life of its own, without a huge amount of input from me, because this is not about me, this is about exploring these wonderful breeds that we must use or we will lose them. And in the States, there is the teeth back in. You'd have thought by now, I don't know how many videos there are on the channel, you'd thought by now I would know how to kind of talk to the camera without getting tongue-tied, but I still do. Right, the hashtag shave 'em to save 'em is the hashtag that's used for the heritage breeds in America. Sorry, I don't know what it is in Australia or New Zealand or Canada. If there is an equivalent hashtag, then let me know and I'll share it. So, right, until next time, may your needles be swift and your yarns be soft.